So Nicodemus and I were talking, and you mentioned to share a little bit about my own story. I don't really share much about it on this channel because it's not really that important. My story is my story. You have your own story, and the story is the past. Like, we all have our own story. The only use of it is ultimately that we heal. The course says, is to remember only the loving thoughts and the loving things that happened. Everything else must be forgotten. I'll share with you a little bit on my own story and how it came about, how I found the course, and how I found myself teaching a lot of this work. For now, it's been over a third of my life, almost 20 years. I was an athlete growing up, and I was very driven in basketball. As a high school basketball player, I was a top prospect. I was getting recruited by all these Division I schools, and my future looked bright, and I got injured, and it was I was really down time in my life. My parents were splitting up, and I was having anxiety attacks before the games, and it was really affecting me. And I got injured, and I really couldn't play. And after that, I would say my spiritual journey started. I was bringing a book in for a teacher, and I read the book, and I felt like my life was never the same. It led me into some really interesting places. I had discovered A Course in Miracles as a teenager. I would always read books, and maybe the book would quote A Course in Miracles. I loved it. And when I go to the bookstore, I couldn't read enough of different books, teachers from India, all kinds, anything I get my hands on, some Native American philosophy, anything. And when I would go and read A Course in Miracles, I go, what the heck was that I read? I just didn't even understand it, but I always loved the quotes from the Course. And then in my late 20s, I was really dove deep into it. And at the time, the teacher I was learning from was going to India and asked me to teach their class. And it was very interesting. When they called me, I knew they were going to ask me this. They had another teacher, and it didn't work out. And they called me, and I just got the sense of they're going to ask me to teach their classes while they were gone. And it was a class on meditation and A Course in Miracles. And immediately said yes. And that was now 17 years ago or so, somewhere around there. And my own journey through my 20s into my 30s into my 40s, I was just always drawn to what does it take for us to transcend suffering. I had felt I had suffered really deeply early on in life, even though my life looked great, and, I was an athlete, I had a good family, I had confidence, friends. Wasn't any of those things. It was just that I felt really deeply something was off about life. It looked like everybody, I was very sensitive, and I felt like everyone around me seemed miserable. And even when they smiled, it was like the smile was covering up this existential angst that it just seemed like most human beings had. And I was, being a natural seeker, I was like, is there a way out of this? And I would take any teaching that really could teach me the way out of pain and suffering. Once I came to the course, at that time, really got into it, my life fell apart at the time. This was going back, I was in the mortgage industry, and the markets corrected and crashed in 2007. This was, and I just was really in a lot of pain at that time. And I remember picking up the course and doing the lessons every day, and I could really feel the shift very quickly happening in me. And with the course, it was very interesting. It was as though I knew of that voice. And I'll say this, I don't really share this that often. I was always fascinated with Jesus ever since I was a kid. I was, you know, my mother was into Christianity. She used to have Bible studies. And very early on, I was reading the Bible. And I can remember even by sixth grade or so, I was very fascinated with Jesus. I would watch all these Jesus shows or movies, things like King of Kings and Jesus of Nazareth, anything I could watch. And my family fostered that. We would go to church, and my uncle was sang in the church and would sing hymns, and so I was very drawn to it. But pretty quickly on, I felt that there was some things that didn't make sense, and I would have questions that I didn't really love the answer that I got to them, and that's just really where my seeking journey began. I mean, my brothers and I, we read other books in church, and anything that really spoke of what I felt like was the truth in my heart. And I always felt like I could discern what the truth was by the way that I felt. So fast forward now into my 20s, I'm traveling to India, and one of the interesting things about in India, there's pictures of Jesus everywhere, which for me was pretty ironic going all the way to India to learn of teachers and masters, gurus, and there's pictures of Jesus everywhere. And Jesus held in the highest regard in India. And that was very interesting for me learning the course because I could say this is that it felt like I had heard Jesus say this before or something. I don't know not really how to describe it. That might sound crazy. If you're watching this channel, you subscribe to this channel, you probably have had similar experiences where you just feel, there's a line in the course where in chapter 16, what Jesus says, he says, the way to truth is open, follow it with me. I remember the first time I read that, I got chills of, yeah, I'm going to follow it with you. And it's been a journey ever since. And, I want to say this, I'm a student of A Course in Miracles. Yes, I'm a teacher on the channel, but I do the course myself because the course itself is the teacher. And that's why I urge all my students and people that come to class, I've gone through the whole book over many years. I read the entire text to my advanced class. I call it the advanced class, where I'd read the whole text to them. It took 3 years to go through the whole text, the manual for teachers, the supplements. You can actually see some of those videos on the channel. And, to really, I would read it to the students and they'd ask questions or I'd comment on it. And that was really a deep learning for me. I really do this actually so I could learn it deeper. One of the things he says in the course is to have peace, teach peace to learn it. And I don't mean teaching it like this on the channel, where we're always teaching. And how are we out in the world to teach it in our relationships, to teach it to the stranger at the gas station? We're learning to teach peace. As we teach peace, we learn it because it comes back to us. So that's a little bit about my journey, how I came to the course. I became a trainer. I trained for 3 years where I would do trainings for hundreds of people in a room in 4 days. I did it for many years. I do 38 trainings a year. And when I would train trainers for many years, I would teach them A Course in Miracles. We would go through a year and a half, the whole book, and they do the lessons. And, even though the training was very distinct in the way I didn't talk about A Course in Miracles in the training, but it was very much about forgiveness and about healing. So I could apply all the principles that I learned into the trainings, into my private coaching with people. And I'll tell you this, in all the different modalities I've studied as a trainer, an extensive background with non-duality from India, a lot of the different teachers and the lineages of teachers. I'll tell you, when I share things from A Course in Miracles, it's some of the most impactful things for people because intuitively we could sense the truth. We could sense it. And there's a part in one of the lessons, I think it's lesson 189, where Jesus says, forget this world, forget this course, and come with holy, empty hands unto your God. So in the end, he even wants us to, it's not about conceptually knowing the course and, I know it better than this person and I'm so good at talking about it. It's ultimately about us living it. And, I like to think that my journey can be inspiring for others. And no matter where you're at, it's a perfect place to start studying and to learn, no matter where you're at. If you're on a rock bottom or you feel like your life is going really well. And actually, one of the things he says in the course is we have a very difficult time deciphering what is progress forward and steps back. Some of the biggest steps forward we think we take in our life could be some of our biggest setbacks. And what appear to be some of the biggest setbacks can actually be some of our biggest advances forward. And it's been like that in my own life. From those days where I felt like I was at a bottom and I discovered the course in that, it actually changed the very fabric of my existence and my future. And I could say now that the life that I live now is filled with peace, joy, freedom, harmony, love. And it wasn't always like that, but it was the seeking that really I found the solutions. And I'll say this for you. One of the teachers of mine in India said, it's easy if you're earnest, and it's pretty much impossible if you're not. That if we're earnest, we find the right teachings and the right teachers, and the right things show up for us. And it's been like that in my life. So the course says some of the greatest teachers of A Course in Miracles never even studied the course. They just learned to teach forgiveness over condemnation. They learned to teach love instead of attack and condemnation and conflict. So that's my invitation for you is no matter where you're at in your life to really to be earnest and have a little bit of willingness to dive in and to really look at all the dark cornerstones of your mind and to allow the Holy Spirit to heal them for you. And then you bring that out into the world. That's possible for you because it's also possible for me. And it's been my journey. And I wish the same for you. And thank you for being on the channel. And I look forward to continuing our journey together.